The first rays of sunlight stretch across the earth as a small group of humans rises from sleep. Not in a dark cave, but beneath a shelter of branches and hide. The fire still breathes faintly from the night before. Someone adds dried grass. Another steps out to scan the land. What lies ahead today could be anything: a successful hunt, a new campsite, or perhaps just another test of endurance, when the world offered no guarantees. We often picture cavemen as hairy brutes, dragging clubs and grunting at shadows, images born from cartoons, not reality. In truth, these were sharp-minded, adaptable people living in the Paleolithic era, a span of time that began 2.6 million years ago and lasted until about 12,000 years ago. More than 99% of human history was lived this way, long before writing, before farms, before metal or cities. Our ancestors thrived by understanding their world, not ruling it. They made tools with precision, hunted in groups, built homes from mammoth bones and hides, created art, sang songs, raised children, and survived across changing climates, continents, and catastrophes. Their lives weren't simple, but they were deeply connected to the land and to each other. Our window into their world comes from archaeology, cave art, bone tools, fire pits, as well as insights from indigenous hunter-gatherer societies like the Inuit, who carry echoes of this deep past. You're watching Inuit Heritage. Subscribe if you're ready to step into the lives of the humans who shaped our story from the very beginning. Morning came not with the sound of alarms, but with shifting light on skin and the scent of smoke in the nostrils. As the sun crept across the horizon, Paleolithic humans stirred from sleep. Whether they were resting in a mammoth bone hut beneath a canopy of hides or inside a rock shelter, the rhythm of the natural world dictated their days. There were no fixed routines, only cycles of need, opportunity, and adaptation. The first priority was always the fire. Starting one from scratch took time and skill, so most groups kept embers alive overnight, buried in ash or tucked inside slow-burning material. Someone, often the lightest sleeper or most practiced hand, would coax those embers back to life, feeding them with dried grass, bark, or dung. The fire was more than warmth. It was a beacon of safety, a cooking hearth, and the emotional center of the home. Next came water. Streams, rivers, or melting ice were the usual sources. Carried in animal bladders, woven baskets, or bark containers, water was retrieved daily. No stockpiles, no plumbing. From there, priorities shifted depending on weather, season, and recent success. Was food running low? Were tools dulled or broken? Had the wind carried fresh animal scents nearby? The group split off by capability and need. Some scouted for game trails or fresh berries, others repaired spear tips or resharpened blades using hammerstones and flakes. Older children might mimic adults, learning by observation, not through instruction, but through constant exposure. Unlike our modern schedules, where every hour is boxed and measured, Paleolithic life followed natural cues. The heat of midday might bring rest in shaded spots. Heavy rain meant huddling close to the fire. A sudden change in animal patterns could prompt relocation entirely. Yet, despite the harshness of their world, mornings were not rushed. They were careful, deliberate, rooted in the awareness that every decision could shape the chances of survival, not just for the day, but for the seasons ahead. In this way, Paleolithic people began each day not just by waking up, but by awakening to their environment, their group, and their own ancient instincts. Food was never guaranteed. Each day brought new calculations. What was in season, what game had passed nearby, which plants had ripened, and how far one would need to travel to find either. Paleolithic humans were not farmers. They were foragers, generalists who understood the land in extraordinary detail. Survival meant knowing when the salmon ran upstream, when nuts dropped from trees, or when tubers could be safely dug from the earth. Contrary to modern myth, men didn't only hunt and women didn't only gather. While adult males often took on the risks of large game hunting, archaeological evidence shows significant overlap in roles. Women trapped small animals, fished with woven nets, and tracked edible plants with the same precision hunters used for prey. Children joined in too, plucking berries, catching insects, learning which plants to avoid. Hunting itself ranged from opportunity to orchestration. Early humans may have scavenged kills left by predators, but by 500,000 years ago, there's clear evidence of direct organized hunting. At Boxgrove in England, a horse shoulder blade bears a deep puncture mark left by a wooden spear. That kind of injury isn't scavenged. It's delivered with skill and intent. Wooden spears from Schoningen, Germany, dated to 400,000 years ago, show balance and shaping that allowed for long-distance throws. These weren't crude sticks, they were engineered tools. Later innovations like the spear thrower, atlatl, and the bow and arrow allowed hunters to kill from a safer distance, increasing both success and survival. Still, hunts could fail, and when they did, gathered foods kept communities going. Plant remains found in ancient dental calculus reveal a diet rich in tubers, seeds, nuts, fruits, and greens. Medicinal plants like yarrow and willow bark were also part of their knowledge, used for pain relief or digestion. Some groups fished using sharpened bone hooks or basket traps. At Coaster in Illinois, 9,000-year-old remains show nets and hooks used to harvest river fish. Along coasts, shellfish and seaweed added vital nutrients. Season dictated everything. Spring brought eggs and shoots. Summer yielded berries and wild game. Autumn meant nuts and preparation for the lean months. Winter, that was for smoked meat, frozen stores, and whatever could still be found in the snow-covered silence. Feeding a group wasn't just a task. It was a constantly evolving, deeply shared responsibility and the foundation of Paleolithic life. By midday, the rhythms of the day had shifted. The sun climbed higher, and depending on the climate, so did the heat. Those who had gone out returned, some empty-handed, others with small animals, roots, or handfuls of greens and nuts. In successful moments, larger game might be dragged in by a group, blood still fresh, the air thick with the scent of survival. Food was rarely stored in abundance. Most of it was eaten the same day or preserved through drying or freezing in colder climates. Meals were simple but essential. Meat was roasted over open flames or stone-cooked with heated rocks dropped into watertight containers made from bark or hide. Tubers were pounded to soften fibers. Seeds were ground between stones. Plant toxins were neutralized with soaking or boiling, techniques learned through trial, error, and long memory. These midday hours were not just for eating, they were for making. Blades dulled with every use, scrapers chipped, points snapped. So after meals came tool maintenance. Paleolithic people weren't just users of tools. They were lifelong tinkerers, craftspeople by necessity. A cutting edge could be reworked from stone in minutes, but complex tools like barbed harpoons or composite spears took hours of careful shaping and binding. Stone, bone, antler, ivory, and wood were all part of the Paleolithic toolkit. Scrapers thinned hides for clothing, burins engraved patterns or symbols. Awls pierced holes for stitching with sinew. Antler was especially prized, not just for its strength, but for its flexibility. And while most wood has long since decayed, rare finds show human-shaped spear shafts to balance perfectly with their hands and throwing arcs. Children learned these crafts by being in the middle of them. There were no schools, no lectures, just repetition, imitation, and correction. A child watched their mother tie a sling, their uncle flake a stone, or their elder smoke sinew to make it pliable. Eventually, their hands copied the movements. Knowledge was passed not in words, but in rhythm, shape, and skill. Some rested in the shade, others cleaned hides, mended clothing, or sorted gathered plants. The day moved quietly in these moments, filled with tasks as vital as any hunt. In Paleolithic life, survival didn't come from chaos. It came from cooperation, patience, and attention to every small detail. As daylight faded, the fire became the center of everything. It was where people gathered, not just for warmth, but for stories, songs, and shared memory. With the day's task behind them, the group shifted from survival to connection. Evenings were for storytelling. A successful hunt became a lesson. A strange dream became a warning. Around the flames, knowledge passed from one generation to the next, not through writing, but through voice, gesture, and myth. Art played a key role in these moments. Cave paintings in places like Chauvet and Lascaux show powerful images of animals, hunts, and half-human figures. Perhaps spiritual, perhaps symbolic. These weren't decorations. They meant something. And we still don't fully know what. Music echoed too. Bone flutes from Germany, over 40,000 years old, suggest early humans made music with tone and intention. Drums, clapping, and voice likely followed. Tools not just for rhythm, but for ritual. There are hints of early belief systems. Burials show care and symbolism. Flowers at Shanidar, beads and carved tools at Sungir. Medicinal plants found in ancient teeth suggest healing knowledge and perhaps spiritual roles like shamans or caregivers. Evenings weren't empty, they were alive with culture, emotion, and meaning. In the glow of the fire, humans became more than survivors. They became storytellers, artists, and thinkers, laying the roots of everything we'd someday call civilization. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the day's urgency gave way to a different rhythm. The fire, once just a tool of survival, became something else, a gathering point. Flames cracked and danced in the dimming light, casting shadows across worn hands and tired faces. This was the time for reflection, for mending what could be repaired, for speaking what needed to be shared. Evenings in the Paleolithic world weren't idle. With bellies filled and the day's labor behind them, people turned to connection. They told stories, some to teach, others to remember, and many to explain the world they lived in. A successful hunt became a lesson. The stars overhead became a map. The wind in the trees might become a spirit. The line between knowledge and myth was thin, but purposeful. This is also when the first human art came alive. Not just decorative, but symbolic, deeply meaningful. In places like Chauvet and Lascaux, humans painted on cave walls using ochre, charcoal, and manganese. They depicted animals they hunted, movements they observed, and beings that may have existed only in vision. Part man, part beast. Some believe these paintings were tied to ritual or hunting magic. Others think they recorded memory or explored altered states of consciousness. And art didn't stop at cave walls. Small figurines carved from ivory or stone, like the famous Venus of Willendorf, suggest symbolic understandings of fertility, life, and perhaps status. Bone flutes, some over 40,000 years old, found in Germany, show that music echoed across Paleolithic evenings. Crafted with precision, they produced scales still recognizable today. Instruments were likely paired with voice, rhythm, and movement, early forms of dance and ceremony. Though drums made from hide and hollowed logs rarely survive, their presence is almost certain. Sound and song, carried through smoke and silence, bound the group together. This time of day may also have included healing rituals. Residues from medicinal plants like yarrow and poplar have been found in ancient dental plaque, suggesting both knowledge and practice of pain relief and care. Some believe that certain individuals acted as shamans or healers, guiding their groups through both physical and spiritual realms. Evenings were not just a rest from the hunt. They were where Paleolithic culture truly emerged. In the glow of firelight, humans became more than survivors. They became storytellers, artists, musicians, and spiritual thinkers, the very things that define us even now. In Paleolithic life, children weren't separated from adults. They learned by watching, copying, and doing. A child might sit beside someone sharpening a flint blade or follow an elder through the forest, learning which berries were safe and which ones stung the tongue. There were no lectures, just constant participation. Their training began early. By helping gather wood, carry water, or chase small animals, they built the skills they'd need later. It was a slow, natural education woven into every moment of the day. Injuries were common, but what stands out is how many people survived them. Skeletons show healed fractures, worn joints, and missing teeth that didn't stop someone from living years beyond the injury. That kind of recovery only happens when others help. When wounds are clean, food is shared, and protection is given. This suggests something powerful: empathy. These weren't groups that left the weak behind. They made space for care. Burial sites confirm this. At Shanidar Cave, a Neanderthal with a crushed leg and blindness was buried carefully. At Sungir in Russia, 2 children were buried with thousands of ivory beads. These weren't just bodies covered with earth. They were remembered. Hygiene, too, was likely valued. Fibrous plants could clean teeth. River bathing kept infection away. The cleaner the body, the better the chances of healing. Even in a harsh world, Paleolithic people weren't just surviving. They were looking after one another. And in that, we see the earliest roots of what we still call humanity. Paleolithic life wasn't rooted to one place. People moved with the seasons, with the animals, and with the shifting patterns of weather and resource availability. Mobility wasn't random, it was strategy. A group might follow migrating herds for weeks, then shift to rivers when fish spawned. They knew when berries ripened, when birds nested, and when snow made travel too risky. These weren't guesses. They were decisions built on generations of memory. Even the land was shaped by human hands. In places like ancient Australia, evidence shows controlled burning. Fire used not to destroy, but to renew. It cleared brush, encouraged fresh growth, and brought animals closer. Trade or gift exchange stretched far. Obsidian, seashells, and rare pigments have been found hundreds of miles from their source. Such movement hints at social ties between distant groups, alliances, friendships, maybe even shared rituals. Survival in the Paleolithic wasn't just about reacting to the world. It was about reading it, anticipating change, and staying a step ahead. The world was always shifting, but so were they. For over 2 million years, Paleolithic humans lived without metal, cities, or written language, yet they thrived. They read the land like a book, crafted tools with purpose, passed down skills through hands and memory, and built communities based on sharing, not ownership. They were generalists, hunters, foragers, toolmakers, artists, and caregivers. Their diets were diverse, their technologies efficient, and their lives deeply intertwined with nature's rhythms. They didn't conquer the world, they adapted to it. And many of their strategies echo today in indigenous knowledge systems. From Inuit ice cellars to Aboriginal fire management, the wisdom of survival and balance still endures. In a time where we face environmental strain, social division, and disconnection from the natural world, Paleolithic life reminds us of something simple but powerful. Humans were always capable of cooperation, creativity, and care, long before civilization. So the next time you imagine a caveman, don't picture a brute with a club. Picture a skilled tracker, a careful teacher, a community elder passing down knowledge by firelight. Not a relic of the past, but a foundation of who we are